Hey, welcome to the podcast. This is the Surge Effect, and this podcast, well, it'll probably have an effect on you. Well, hello and welcome to the Surge Effect. In this episode of the Surge Effect, we are going to be talking about the new cabinet picked by Mark Carney, and we are going to touch on an interview done by Vassey from CTV. Quite interesting, and that's where we're going to be heading with today's podcast. So it's going to be short and sweet, not too long. Just going to go over, of course, like I said, Mark Carney's cabinet picks and a little video on what Pierre Poilievre thinks of the cabinet picks. And there we go. So let's get started. So to get us going here, here's a picture of his some of his cabinet picks that are already back. They were Trudeau's ministers, you know. LeBlanc, he's the same one. Jolie, she's the same one. Francois, same guy. She was going to actually retire, and she did, and then she came back. Of course, everyone knows this gentleman here, same thing. Sean Fraser, he was going to retire, and he came back. They're all the same. There's Stephen Guilbeault, the guy who climbed the CN Tower, because he's a environmentalist. And, of course, on the end, everyone knows Chrystia Freeland. She back again. So, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to talk a little bit about this, about teams and people's teams. If you have the same team for 10 years and they're not winning, chances are if you're into sports, you're going to change the players of that team. Look at it that way, right? So here's a team that's been losing Canada for 10 years, have lost Canada for 10 years, and these people are back on the team. For what? More losing? Look at it that way, right? You got to mix it up. You got to mix stuff up. So here's a little video I'm going to show you of course, Mark Carney and his crew, the good, the bad, the ugly. And here we go.
Prime Minister Mark Carney announced his new cabinet Tuesday, introducing fresh faces, keeping some familiar ones, and a focus on revamping Canada-US relations, reducing the cost of living, and addressing public safety. Carney announced 28 ministers and 10 secretaries of state, a revitalized position for junior ministers devoted to specific issues. Several prominent Trudeau-era ministers were kept on. Chrystia Freeland is staying on as transport minister. Sean Fraser, who had walked away from federal politics before changing his mind, is returning as Justice Minister. Stephen Guilbeault from Quebec, the former Environment Minister who drew conservative ire for the federal carbon price and other climate policies, will remain in cabinet as Heritage Minister. Other familiar faces include Dominique LeBlanc, Mélanie Joly, and François-Philippe Champagne. There will be 12 members of cabinet from Toronto and the GTA. 3 of them are from Brampton, an area that the Liberals seem keen not to take for granted. 9 of the 28 cabinet members were elected federally for the first time in April. Former Housing Minister Nate Erskine-Smith is out, as well as longtime minister and former Toronto Police Chief Bill Blair.
He's out.
Other notable exits include former Agriculture Minister Cody Bois and Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson.
Out. So the ones that are no longer there, I'm just going to pop that up again. There you go. You might remember some familiar faces there, and maybe you won't. But they are out. They're gone. So you got to keep in mind that a lot of those ministers that are back, they fought for 10 years about carbon tax. They literally, if you go back on the House and look at what transpired in our House of Commons here in Canada, those people fought to keep carbon tax prices up and your pay jacket down by paying the carbon tax pricing. They wanted that carbon tax. They basically pushed everything together and pushed all their chips in one basket for that carbon tax. They wanted that carbon tax. They wanted the Canadian people to pay for that carbon tax. They did that for 10 years, on. And now all of a sudden, now it's a big reversal by Carney saying, we're going to take a little bit of carbon tax. Well, I just see our gas in our local town here just went up another 20 cents a liter. Of course, it's 4.5 liters in a gallon up here in Canada. And 20 cents a liter, that's an extra $1 a gallon, basically. It just went up just like that. It was down just before the election. Of course, everyone thinks that, Carney was a hero. He's not a hero. Not at all. So before I show you Pierre Poilievre's, what Pierre Poilievre did, what he said the other day at his press conference, I just wanted to just read you a couple of things in regards to why you wouldn't pick the same team. Now, it's not boring, hopefully, and hopefully you might understand. And you have your own opinions why you wouldn't pick the same team. If you had the same team that was losing for the last 10 years, I don't care who it is, Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, LA, whoever, whatever. If they're losing, they change the coaches, they change the players. You got to mix it up to make a better team, not a worse team and not the same team. For different reasons, because stagnation, a team that repeatedly fails often lacks innovation or adaptability, and you're trapped in a cycle of outdated methods and ideas. It also creates low morale because constant failure or dysfunction erodes motivation, leading to disengagement in a toxic environment that drags everyone down. I believe it wastes resources, time, money, effort. It's spent on a failing team could be better invested in a fresh talent or even new strategies with a higher potential for that team. Missed opportunities, loyalty to a problematic team can blind you to better collaborators who could drive success and open new doors. Reputation or damage associated with chronic underperformance can tarnish your credibility, making it harder to gain trust or support with others. How about lack of accountability? A team that fails for years, in this case 10, often avoids taking responsibility, fostering a culture where mistakes are repeated over and over again. How about skill erosion? It's working with a stagnant group can hinder your growth as you're not challenged to learn or develop new skills. How about efficiency? Problematic teams often waste time on conflicts or poor processes, slowing process and progress and frustrating those who want results. Resistance to change. Long-term failing teams may cling to how things have always been and rejecting necessary reforms or fresh perspectives and new ideas. Opportunity costs. Sticking with the losing team means you're not building with winners. You could elevate your goals and achieve real outcomes. Last one I put on here is cutting ties or restructuring might be tough, but it's often the smarter play to break free from a decade of dysfunction. But yet there's Mark Carney. He picks all these same players. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Drop them down below. Let me know what you think, because like I said, I personally believe it is a bad idea to stay with the same team. I don't care what team it is. If they're losing, time to switch it up. But in this case, no, let's keep the same one. Let's just go on for another 4 years, see what happens. Same thing is going to happen. All right, so I'm going to show you a video here of Pierre Poilievre. Did a little press conference yesterday after the big pick of the cabinet ministers on the front bench, and here is what he had to say. I'm going to flip over here. There we go.
So I'd like to begin today in English by congratulating the new ministers for their roles. It's literally a 1 in a million opportunity. I think they have 40 ministers in total, and there's about 41 million people, so it's literally 1 in a million to be a minister, and a big accomplishment to get to that place. The Conservatives will take our role of holding the government accountable seriously. That doesn't mean we reflexively oppose everything the government does. When it comes, for example, to foreign affairs, if the government does a good job at defending our national interests in negotiations with the U.S., then we will support those efforts. When they're right, we'll stand with them. When they're wrong, we will oppose them. We hope the country succeeds. We want the nation to do well. We ran on the promise of bringing home Canada's promise, a very simple deal that Canada used to provide, which is that anyone who works hard gets a great life in an affordable home on a safe street under our proud flag. And that means boosting the buying power of our workers and seniors by cutting wasteful spending and bureaucracy to bring down taxes and inflation. It means freeing workers and businesses to build more affordable homes and develop resources. It means unleashing investment by cutting and simplifying taxes. It means protecting our streets with stronger laws and borders. Canadians cannot afford more high-spending, high-taxing, over-regulating, out-of-touch Liberal policies that have priced young people out of homes, inflicted crime waves on our communities, driven 2 million people to the food bank, and made life unbearable for too many hardworking and decent people. In his first press conference, Mr. Carney talked a good game about reversing Liberal policies in these areas, but now we have to find out if he was serious. And so far, it's not a promising start. The first disappointment is, unfortunately, his cabinet. He appointed Trudeau's old team and Trudeau's old advisors. Stephen Guilbeault, whose radical green agenda would shut down all future developments in our resource industry, is still the minister responsible for Quebec. Sean Fraser was the immigration minister who caused the immigration crisis.
Failed.
The housing minister who gave us the housing crisis. And now he's the minister responsible for addressing the Liberal crime crisis. It seems like he is the master at failing upward. Chrystia Freeland, who as finance minister hiked capital gains tax and carbon taxes and massively grew our debt to the point where we now spend $1 billion a week on interest, stays in the cabinet. Then there's Gary Anadasangari, the new Minister of Public Safety, who said the actual crimes, the actual issues around bail are quite sound, and they are embedded in, codified in law right now, as in to say that there's nothing wrong with the system. Well, in fact, there's everything wrong, as we see from the growing crime wave on our streets. Then there's François-Philippe Champagne, Trudeau's Minister of Everything, who never really managed to do anything.
Nothing.
And he did it very loudly. But nice.
He did it very loudly. And in our house all the time, he always kept saying, I will take nothing from these people across the aisle, Mr. Speaker. And he never really did anything. He just said he wouldn't agree with the people across the aisle. He wouldn't take any information from people across the aisle or nothing. And that's the way he was. And we're paying these people $250,000, $300,000 a year to do nothing. It's disgusting.
Guy, I'll give him credit. He's a nice guy. But he was the Minister of Industry during which we had the worst economic growth of any country in the G7. And now he's in charge of the budget. Then there's Joly, LeBlanc, Haidu, Anand. Anand was the president of the Treasury Board, during which time the bureaucracy and the consultant bills blew out of control. In all, 14 Trudeau ministers are now in Carney's cabinet. It's more of the same when Canada needs real change. Even the new additions are problematic. Gregor Robertson was the mayor of Vancouver, who pushed for total legalization of hard drugs, distribution of tax-funded opioids. During his time there was a 600% increase in overdoses. Now he's the housing minister. Well, what's his record on housing? Well, he increased housing taxes in Vancouver by 141%, and the result was that housing costs went up by 149%, more than doubling the cost and giving Vancouver, his city, the most expensive housing prices in all of North America. Now, Mr. Carney puts this gentleman in charge of housing. If this is the new blood that Mr. Carney is bringing into the cabinet, then sadly for Canadians, nothing is going to change, and the role of the Conservative Party will be more important than ever.
So I just basically said in my items I listed earlier before I flipped to this video, why you would not want to keep the same team. Unfortunately, we have people in Canada that decide to vote for the Liberals, and now we're going to be stuck in this situation that we are with the Liberals, because same crap, different pile. Just the way it works, right? You have the same people, same policies they've been fighting for 10 years. We have the same economy we've had for 10 years. Nothing's changed from the same people, and now you're bringing back the same people again. If people in Canada don't understand what's going on or don't see what's happening here, I just do not understand it. I do not understand it. Anyway, last video. This is Vassey from CTV. She is Kaselop. She is going to be talking to Mark Carney. This happened yesterday. A little interview. Pay attention to Mark Carney, how many times he steps over top of Vassey when she's trying to speak, or how many times he cuts her off, or how he gets agitated for certain questions that she asks because he just doesn't like to be accountable. And pay attention to what he's going to do for Canada. Because keep in mind, you people that voted for the Liberals, you voted out of fear. Fear, not facts. So you let your emotions run and you voted out of fear. That's exactly what you did. And this is what's going to happen to Canada because of it. Here we go.
Big projects, and that is around energy. And in particular, when you said during the campaign you want to make Canada an energy superpower, do you mean you want Canada to export more oil and gas?
Well, that is an element of it, but it's not the element of it. So there are multiple elements. When you're a superpower, let's look at America. America is a superpower. It is a superpower because it has a strong economy. It is a superpower because it has a strong military. Arguably, it is also a superpower because it has soft power, has cultural, the American influence is multiple, and all of those aspects contribute to it. So when I talk about being an energy superpower, I always say in both clean and conventional energies. So what does that mean? Yes, it does mean oil and gas. It means using our oil and gas here in Canada to displace imports wherever possible, particularly from the United States. It makes no sense to be sending that money south of the border or across the ocean. But yes, it also means more exports, without question. But it doesn't stop there. That in and of itself doesn't make us an energy superpower. We can be an energy superpower, and we have all the components in nuclear, in hydro, in potentially in carbon capture and storage.
Ooh, carbon capture and storage. There we go. There's the catchword, right? Also, during this interview, keep track of all the times when he's answering a question when it's just kind of a lot of words, but really saying nothing. He's really good at that, right? He answers a question, but he's really not answering the question. He just says a bunch of gobbledygook just to kind of throw people off the track. The things in Canada that we have that'll make us rich and very, very wealthy is our oil and our LNG, our gas. This guy, along with Trudeau, well, Trudeau did it, along with him, Bill C-69. They put a freeze on all oil coming out of the ground as well as natural gas. And liberals in this country voted to keep him in power because they were fearful of Trump. They were fearful of Trump. Taking their eye off the prize, which is our oil and our gas in the ground that would make Canada one of the wealthiest countries in the world. See how powerful fear is? Pay attention to this guy when he speaks.
Which is going to be one of the determinants of of competitiveness and productivity in a number of sectors. So what are we doing to build out all those aspects in our economy? What are we doing today? And look, if I were... I shouldn't classify myself, but a conventional politician might say, you know what we should be judged by is whether or not we approve one pipeline, right? And that's going to make us an energy superpower. And that is a type of objective that you can define and you can point to that is progress, but it doesn't accomplish the bigger goals. And it's not at the level of what Canada is capable of. We need to do multiple things at the same time in order to build this base so that we are creating wealth and competitiveness, better lives for Canadians for generations. So we're going to be very ambitious across a range. That's why we're not asking for one nation-building project. We're asking for nation-building projects, and we are going to move as rapidly as possible on as many of them as possible.
I think if I'm accurately representing the point of view from people whose livelihood depends on the conventional energy sector, it's not that they're asking you like, that's it, that's the be-all, end-all. It's that they want to know where conventional energy fits into your ambitions. And it's not just because, if I may, not just because of the record of the previous government, it's because of you yourself, your book Values, for example, which extensively talks about a reorientation of the market around the climate imperative. I think Canadians had been asking throughout the campaign and now, like, is this Prime Minister Mark Carney of values, or is it the Prime Minister of the campaign? Like, are you going to build that pipeline if the consensus exists?
First off, I've said repeatedly yes, first point. Secondly, that because I understand the need for that consensus, I'm a prime minister who can help create that consensus. You can't create a consensus on your own, but you have to drive processes that bring provinces along, bring the private sector in. Remember, I've got extensive experience. This is not just a concept to me. I have been involved in major energy projects for over 3 decades in the private sector, so I've got that experience, bringing the provinces, working with Indigenous partners, putting it in place.
He also closed down the Keystone Pipeline to our west and stopped production of oil, but yet his company, Brookfield, they built pipelines in Brazil and the EU. So stopped everything in Canada, but kept moving everything for his company. So keep that in mind as well while he's giving you this gobbledygook.
As we have billions of dollars of financing for those Indigenous partners, bringing in somebody like Tim Hodgson, who, when he was CEO of Hydro One, was one of the only major corporations to have a major Indigenous partnership program that actually worked. So we're bringing the components in. We have to deliver. Let me make another point, because I appreciate that you've read my book very carefully. At the core of the way I talk about the energy transition is the future of, including about Canada being an energy superpower, is the future is low risk. Canada's low risk is a business investment place. Low cost. We're getting the cost down, including the oil sands. The marginal production is low cost, and low carbon. All three of those come together.
Low carbon. See, there it is again. Low carbon. He's talking about these carbon credits and everything else that's going to be happening. You wait and see. Once again, wolf, sheep's clothing.
Have the ingredients of all that. Let's get together and move on it. And it takes more than just one pipeline in order to accomplish.
And I do understand that point, but I think, like, in your book, multiple occasions, for example, you talk about the merits of a carbon tax. And now we have a different Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who says, the first thing I did in this very room was get rid of the carbon tax.
Good for you, Vassey.
Consumer carbon tax,
correct,
which is different than
the industrial side, but it's still a portion of the carbon.
See, he's playing word games here, right? Because, yeah, he got rid of the consumer carbon tax, but he's not going to get rid of the industrial carbon tax. Well, when you put industrial carbon tax on a company, let's say, creating steel for cars, who do you think is going to pay for that carbon tax? You think that the industrial company is going to pay for that carbon tax? Or do you think that the consumer is going to pay for that carbon tax? Leave your comments below. You know who's going to pay for this carbon tax. You know it.
Tax scheme that existed in this country.
How much of the resources did that consumer, how much of the emission reduction did that consumer
9%.
Carbon tax? Yeah, well, it's actually 6, but if you extrapolate it out to 2030,
if it went as far as it was supposed to go, it's supposed to be, it's not 9.
So think about that, 6%. They're talking about 6%, but there's only 0.004% of carbon actually in the atmosphere, but they're talking about getting rid of, getting it down to 6% emissions because by not using fossil fuels and blah, blah, blah. So we're going to shut the whole world down for like 6%. So according to him, but if you actually do your Google search and check it out online, it's 0.004% is what's carbon in the atmosphere.
It's not nothing. It's not much. It's not much. And we can do much better with different approaches, including collaborative approaches, which is what I'm looking to do. And look,
how can you be collaborative?
If you want a simple answer on will I support building a pipeline? Yes, that simple answer. I've given that multiple times. But I don't stop at that. I don't stop at, for example, if you want a simple answer on how do I make homes more affordable, I could just say, we're going to cut GST on homes. But that doesn't solve the problem. Just doing one pipe, it's good. Don't get me wrong, it's good. That's a positive thing, and working collaboratively in order to happen. But it's not enough. It's not enough to make Canada an energy superpower. It's not enough to build our full potential. It's not enough to truly get incomes growing across the country. We can do much more. We are going to be very, very ambitious. Build big, build bold, build now.
It does speak, though, to what people in Alberta and Saskatchewan who didn't vote for your party are worried about, right? They are worried that it is the Mark Carney of values, it is the Justin Trudeau government, and the reason I ask about that is against that backdrop, right? You are still saying you're going to keep C-69 in place. You are going to keep the emissions cap in place. They view that as evidence of something. They view that, pardon me, as evidence of something that runs counter to what you're saying right now.
What I've said very clear. Look, I am a pragmatist. I go over and over on this, and I really am. I'm interested in results. So the point of building a pipeline, the point of building out carbon capture is to get the results, to get those barrels to the market, to get carbon down. You can do both. We have the capability to do more. And we have the capabilities financially, from a technological perspective, in terms of the companies. Federal government can play a role. The province of Alberta, obviously other provinces, Indigenous people have to come along for almost all of these projects in order for them to actually work. And what I'm putting on the table is, okay, let's go. Let's not talk about this. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's focus in on specific projects and let's work on them together. Now, very constructive, sorry if I may, constructive conversations with Premier Moe in this vein,
interrupt him while he's
also with
talking.
Premier Smith in this vein. So the next stage of that is to sit down across premiers and other groups and start to refine that list and move forward. And we will change things at the federal level that need to be changed in order for projects to move forward.
Does that include C69 or the emissions cap?
It could include both. Absolutely could include both. But I'm not going to do it conceptually. I'm going to do it on specifics. Do it for moving forward. And that's the point. The test is Canadians deserve results, not rhetoric and not talking past each other. And one of the things that I feel very strongly about,
I believe what he just said there is that Canadians do deserve results and not rhetoric and just talking past each other. The last 10 years, the Liberals have flushed this country economically down the toilet. He thinks he's going to change it in 4 years. He's the same guy. He's the same person that has helped Trudeau over the last 5 years, since 2020 or 2021, so for 4 years. How's it going to change? How's it going to be different? How's it going to make Canadians' lives better and not worse? Because right now, I'm sorry, I just don't see it.
And understand, I think, from both being in the private sector and working across government over the years, is you can't get results unless you work across partners. So it's the federal government, it's the provinces, it's the companies, it's Indigenous peoples. You can't get result if you just say, we're not going to have environmental assessment. The Harper government tried that approach, effectively tried that approach. It doesn't work. You get tied up in court. So what you have to do is to work together for an efficient and effective environmental assessment process. What we have clearly signaled, and we've been absolutely clear, I've been very clear about this, is we will rely on provincial environmental assessments as appropriate. That is a huge shift in approach that potentially unlocks a series of projects. You have to do other things at the same time. Again, roll up our sleeves, sit down, map out what needs to be done. We've got the team here, and we have the will to do it.
I'm already getting the wrap sign, and I apologize. I know your time is very limited. I wonder if I could ask very briefly on how Parliament will work on what you just mentioned. Have you spoken to Pierre Poilievre about seeking support from the Conservatives in advancing parts of that agenda?
Mr. Poilievre and I spoke after the election, immediately after the election. He congratulated me, and I signaled to him that if he was, as he is, seeking a by-election, I would call it as soon as I'm allowed to do that. So that's the conversation that we've had. He's not the leader of the opposition, as you know, at the moment, so any conversations, obviously, at least in the near term, would be with Mr. Scheer.
Have you explicitly had any conversations with anyone from any party about crossing over to help form a majority? No. When you called Donald Trump transformative, did you mean transformative in a good or bad way?
Yin and yang. There's both.
There's both?
I said what I said. He is. What matters for Canadians is that the relationship with the U.S. has changed. I've been clear about that. Clear about that for months. I think others were very slow to recognize that. I think it's now increasingly understood. Secondly, that it has bigger ramifications than just the U.S. The way the global economy is working is changing. We need to change. Working with President Trump, working with his team as possible, sovereign nation to sovereign nation, that's what I'm pursuing.
Do you plan to renegotiate USMCA? Can you trust him as a partner?
The sequencing, we'll see about the sequencing. I think the revealed preference of the U.S. is working on some of these sectoral aspects before broader trade deals. It is an advantage to us that USMCA exists. It is not right that it's being violated, but it is still an advantage that exists, and we intend to make the most of our advantages in these negotiations.
Do you trust him?
I will work with them and negotiate with them, yeah.
But do you trust him?
Look, my answer is my answer.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Prime Minister, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for all your time.
Thanks.
It was a pretty decent interview, as far as I'm concerned. Good questions by Vassey. Unfortunately, Mark Carney, he says a lot of words, but nothing really comes out. And I think a lot of Canadians are probably listening to what he's saying, but they don't understand what he's saying because he's really famous for that. Don't forget, all during the election for the Prime Minister's position, all through the election, every time he was at a pulpit, he was saying the same thing. You know, Orange man bad, Trump bad, you know, fear, fear, fear. He's, 51st state, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden he gets elected because that was all a ploy. It was all a tactic. And if you don't believe that, there was an actual post in the National Post in regards to it that they figured that they said that the very first phone call he had with Trump, he told Trump that, listen, I'm going to have to say some bad things about America, but that's just my political tactic, blah, blah, blah. That's what he said. That's what he did. Fear drives people to do stuff. And that's exactly what happened here. So you had Pierre Poilievre on one hand, he wanted hope. And then you had him on the other hand being fearful. People are driven by fear. It's just that simple. Anyway, like I said, he says a lot of words and really says nothing, but it is what it is. That's it for today's podcast, everybody. Thank you very much for checking it out. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share. Helps with the algorithm. Spread it around. And like I always say, life's tough. People are always going through something. And if you know somebody in your life is going through something, help them out. Be there for them. And tell them this one thing. Keep moving forward. You got to keep moving forward. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow's a mystery. Today is the present. And that's why they call it a gift. All right. Till next time, everyone. Cheers.